Hello everyone, this is Shining Noctowls, and tonight I want to do a video, a follow-up video on the previous video I did regarding the connection with Spain and Spain and the connection with Ireland and pretty much Britain, which includes Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, modern-day England. And I wanted to do this video because I've since done a bit more research for my last video. I actually decided to pay. It's a bit expensive, but I feel like it was worth it for the 360 view. I paid around $360 for this upgrade on my True Ancestry, and it was actually worth it to get the results I've been able to uh, um, receive for myself, and then of course my dad, and then my friend Julie. And yeah, I wanted to share this with you guys. One thing I'm going to start off with is, well, the first thing we can start off with is the Ice Age, and I'll see if I can pull up. So here's a map of Europe, 9,000 years ago. You can see the map of Europe all the way, you know, 9,000 years ago was very different, where instead of it being predominantly populated by what we know today as Celtic and Slavic in simple terms, or as this map would say here, um, Celtic, Basque, Italic, Frisian, Saxon, and R1b, then R1a, Slavic, Kurgan, and Aryan. Um, it was very different back then, because, well, the indigenous people of Europe, the R1A and R1B, they actually had originated in originally in I believe it's in South Siberia, and they actually originated in the same place that the paternal haplogroup for the Native American Indians actually came from over 20,000 years ago. So I will see if I can pull this up here. Malta boy haplogroup Q and R. You can see that you can see the Siberians migrated into the Americas, carrying haplogroup Q, and to a lesser extent haplogroup C, which would be more connected to what we know today as the Mongols. And then migration of haplogroup R, remains of a 24,000-year-old Siberian boy. But they had come from pretty much the same location originally, at least with R, haplogroup R1A and R1B. And I'll see if I can pull this up. Um, and this is one reason why Native American Indians, when people, are not sure whether or not, they're completely East Asian or not, what they don't realize is on average, Native American Indians really, when they had split around 24,000 years ago, the ancient North Eurasians really had a mixture of East Asian and ancient North Eurasian to begin with East Asian typically being around 33 to 40%, or well, no, East Asian was actually 60 to 70%, and then the ancient North Eurasian was anywhere from typically 30 to 40%. And I'll see if I can get the exact measures for you guys, but it tended to lean more towards the East Asian than the what we would know today as more so European or modern European. Um, So let me see if I can pull this up. Well, it says here Malta whose remains were discovered in the 1920s near Lake Baikal, eastern Siberia, is thought to be a partial genetic ancestor of Native Americans. There you go. His DNA, which is about 24,000 years ago, matches about 25% of the DNA of living Native Americans. So that would be part of the ancient North Eurasian ancestry. Boy's genome also contains signatures found in Native Americans, but his mitochondrial DNA belongs to haplogroup U, which is found in Europe and West Asia. Okay, so I'll cover U a little bit later on. U actually, U itself didn't originate in Siberia. It actually originated in West Asia, actually. So for people who might have an idea that haplogroup U originated in Siberia, it did not. It actually, I read it came from West Asia, and then it probably had migrated to Siberia. Is probably what happened. And then it says here haplogroup Q is the most common haplogroup in Native Americans. Its sister lineage haplogroup R, which, like I said, would be the what we would know as predominant DNA of Europeans in the modern day, quote unquote Celtic and Slavic, and as well as others. Actually, for those who don't know, there was actually a study done in India where they were saying that kind of the diversification of what they call the Aryan ancestry, haplogroup R1a, which is more also typically associated with Slavs, is that it actually diversified in India. Actually, I think it was around a little over 6,000 years ago. And yeah, it's so it had originally started in Siberia along with R1b and Q, but it really hadn't diversified until it left India. And the reason probably why it was all the way down there was probably also because of the Ice Age, because not only Northern Europe, not only would have Northern Europe have been frozen, but so would have East Asia or Siberia, and so they most likely also migrated down south into what we know as South Asia, which is India, and this is a reason why too why some of the earliest Native American remains are actually found not in North America, but interestingly enough, actually in South America, because back during the Ice Age, which would have been around, really it had lasted until over 30, ended around 13,000 years ago. So back then, a lot of North America, you couldn't really settle on it because, well, it was covered in ice. So a lot of the original natives, or those who had become natives, they had to sail through the ocean. And a lot of them settled on the Pacific coastline because that would have been near the ocean, as well as South America, because that's where it would have been more so inhabitable. So really life started, and this is what the Native American Hopi elder had said in a video I had watched, that when he went to Peru to meet the indigenous Peruvians, which would be the Quechua, the Amati, and the Incas, when he met them, and when he went to I believe Lake Titicaca, which actually is pretty much uh, connected to the words Titi, which is father, and Kaka, which is mother, but that's also connection to the Japanese language or the old Japanese language. And I think I listened to a Japanese man, and in his video he spoke about how in old Japanese or even in current Japanese, I guess, from what he was saying, that you would say chichi haha, which also means father and mother, and so there's that connection there that it really came from more so a Polynesian connection, just as the Tlingit of the Pacific Northwest have said from British Columbia. And interestingly enough, the Tlingit people from British Columbia, there's a place in Colombia in South America that actually um, the natives, I think that it was an area called Altiplano, that they look very similar to the natives that you would find in I'm gonna see uh, in the Pacific Northwest. I'll see if I can find it. Altiplano natives, because I was watching an image, or I saw an image of natives in South America, and they looked very similar to the Tlingit actually. So here's an image of the Tlingit, but I'm gonna see if I can get an image, and then we'll shift back to. I think it's important to start with the native side because it's at least important to cover really the origin of R1b, R1a, and Q. And yeah, so let me see if I can pull up out the plano. See, there was something that I had found. Uh, ooh, I think this was it. Here, let me see if I can pull it up. It's actually also connected to the recent expansion I played for Final Fantasy XIV, which is actually Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail, and it covered a lot on the different native cultures in not only North America or not only the U.S. but also um, Latin America pretty much. Let me see if I can pull this up because there was a group of natives that really reminded me a lot of the Pacific Northwest natives. Let's see if I can pull this up. Chibchen. They're here. I just have to find them because it was such a striking resemblance that I could say that these two people came from a shared origin. Let me see. Where is it? It's like, let's see if I can find it here. There was an image I had seen. Northwest natives. Okay, let me try to write it like this because it's here somewhere. Where is it? Here. This is the one. When I saw these natives that were connected to Altiplano in Colombia, they reminded me of the Tlingit people. Just like even just the way like their hats are, it's very reminiscent of the people from the Pacific Northwest. It's almost a one for one. Um, you can see how it's they both were influenced from Polynesian sailors is what I can see from both groups. And also they would have been connected to the indigenous Japanese Jomon. And the Jomon were the original people of Japan actually. And they had so people who looked more so like this, that they were the original people of Japan, and they actually settled in Japan. Um, might have been as early as 40,000 years ago, and so they were some of the original people of Japan, and then they were also some of the original people who would eventually become part of what we know of as the Polynesian Island Hoppers, who came to the New World. So, or what we know today as the New World. But yeah, so I wanted to cover that because I feel like I can't really talk about the origin story about the R1A, R1b without mentioning Haplogroup Q, which would have been connected to the Native American Indians. And really, this would have been the kind of the beginning of the um, uh, kind of the trying to see what words do I want to use. It would have been the uh, original kind of uh, exodus, if you will, out of Siberia, where the natives had gone east, and then those who would be connected to ancient North Eurasians, which really is still present today in a lot of also northern Europeans as well, and even some Southern Europeans. This is a reason why some of the, for example, some of the natives I've seen, they look a little bit almost like how a German would look like, or even like I watch a Norwegian YouTuber called Bjorn Andres Bohansen, and he feels he has a connection, or at least admires the Native American cultures, particularly from the Northeast U.S. and Canada. Um, they had they had come from, or wait, no, they would have looked similar because their ancestors would have been related to what we know as today as the Ice Age Mammoth Hunters, which would have come from kind of pretty much haplogroup Q, R1A, and R1b, because again they were originally once the same group. So yes, I wanted to cover that because I think it was very important to mention that, because again you can't really talk about the genesis of the predominant group of haplogroup of a lot of modern day Europeans without mentioning the story with the natives, Native Americans in Siberia, which would have also been connected to, in some ways, to also other East Asians. Okay, um, okay, I want to pull up the medicine wheel for you guys really quick. And the medicine wheel is pretty much um, I watched this Native American YouTuber called Hyopatia Lee. She actually is a descendant of Cherokee, Mayan, Lakota, Hawaiian, and Irish ancestry. And she shows the wheel with four different people, being the yellow people, which symbolizes the east, the red people, which symbolizes the south, the black people, which symbolizes the west, and then the white people, which symbolizes the north. So what a lot of people don't realize is, okay, so where did people who had what we know as today as the white skin, or white people, where did they originally come from? Well, they didn't originally start off in Siberia, because in Siberia the skin tone probably would have been closer to a combination of red and yellow, really. With red, I would imagine being more connected to ancient North Eurasian to an extent, and then yellow being more connected to East Asian. Because remember, the Native Americans were a combination of ancient North Eurasian and East Asian, so they were a combination of both red and yellow, which actually makes orange, and actually that's an important kind of color in particular for the Tibetans. And also other East Asian groups. I think even Japan, the color orange has a significance. Um, but yes, it's like I also think about like an orange, uh, peach, or well, or something of that kind of color. Well, I don't know if peach is quite orange. Well, maybe it might have a tinge of orange. But anyways, so yes, so this would have been the kind of the beginning of yellow and red, really, the red and yellow people. So where did the white people come from? Where did these people come from? Well, they didn't come from Siberia originally. They didn't come from Europe originally, because in Europe, you know, during the Ice Age, people would have still had dark skin. It actually came from the Caucasus, or the Middle East, or Anatolia, or that part of the world. And really, um, there's actually an article I was reading, and the article mentioned that there were, I believe, four different contributions of people who, you know, contributed to the ancestry of Europeans. One of them being the Caucasian, well, one of them being the I'll say, hunter-gatherers, others being, so the hunter-gatherers would have already have been in Europe during the Ice Age. Uh, then there would have also have been um, Anatolian farmers who would have brought farming into Europe, and they came from northwest Anatolia into southeast Europe a little over, I think it's 5,000 years ago. And there would also have been the Yamnaya people, or the people who had come from the steppe, and those people would have been those who would have separated from the Native American Indians, uh, or Haplogroup Q, over 20,000 years ago. However, there was a fourth group that we'll mention here, and this was the Caucasian hunter-gatherers, who also took refuge in during the Ice Age, but they didn't take refuge in Europe. They took refuge in, well, the Caucasus region, the Middle East, or in particular, in one area would be Georgia, the country of Georgia. And actually, I was actually connected to this sample, very close actually. My dad was too, but I really had a close genetic sample, genetic match to this specific sample than a lot of other users on my true ancestry. And it talks about there were two different caves, Kotaias and Satsubli. And these were the two caves that pretty much what we would know as Caucasoids, not Caucasians per se, but Caucasoids. Well, I mean, you could say technically Caucasians because, well, it would have been West Asia is technically still Asia, which is part of the Middle East, but for the sake of this video, I'll stick more to Caucasoids to kind of make make it a little bit more clear. It's to not try to confuse it as much with East Asia or Siberia originally. And yes, so yeah, so these would have been the one of the first people of to really have a light, or what we would know today more so as like a white pale skin tone, that they had really had come from the Caucasus region. And oh, actually here it talks about the Malta from Siberia. The partial genome for should be different. Shared alloys. This is just talking about having a shared ancestry with the modern Europeans, which I mentioned before, ancient North Eurasian. But no, but the Caucasian hunter-gatherer would have been separate, because you have to remember the Caucasian hunter-gatherer, they took refuge in the Caucasus region. They didn't take refuge in Siberia, and so yes, so these would have been some of the original people to have fair skin, and these would have been connected to the haplogroup J2A, which would have been connected to the really the ancient Greeks. Also, G2A is also mentioned as well, which would have been connected to Otzi, the Iceman. Um, and oh, actually, haplogroup H is also mentioned as well, which is prominent in various parts of India and other regions. Um, oh, and also Satsubli, which would be another cave, which would have connected K3 and J. You're right, and J was already there. Okay, so yes, so we've covered this now that we've covered Siberia, the Jomon, the East Asian, and now we're in the Caucasus region, and this is where this would have been the beginning of well, of more so the fair white skin tone. Uh, so when the Native Americans talk about the medicine wheel and the four different colored people, well, this is where the white people would have come from, or at least what is said on the medicine wheel is they would have come from the Caucasus region, and actually back then they weren't related to, as my friend Julie likes to say, Anglo-Saxon white. No, that's not how it worked. Back then, they weren't really related to quote unquote what we see today as what's some of the Chinese Americans. I watch this channel called the Fung Bros, and they like to use the word they reference quote unquote white people. They like to use Anglo-Saxon, Finno-Scandinavian, which is more so northern northwest Europe. That's not how it originally was, though. Originally, the original people who probably what the natives would say, had the what they would call as the real. I want to say this in a derogatory way, but what they would say is the real white people. They would have been connected to the Aurelians, and the Aurelians actually it means warriors of the free. The Aurelians they actually they had populated Ukraine around and other parts of northern well even Eastern Europe after the Ice Age. And back then they wouldn't have been Slavs though, because the Slavs hadn't got into that region yet, or even the Aryans per se. The original people were actually the ancient Greek, well, the Aurelians, which would have been related to the what we know today, which would have been connected to the Mycenaean Greeks, which even is more ancient than ancient Greek, but it's essentially connected to the ancient Greeks. And then uh, they would have also been connected to. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Um, Yeah, no. So these would have been oh yeah, and also the Yamnaya people, or what we would know today as R1b, connected to the Celts, or what we know today as being connected to the Celtic lineage. They would have also have mixed with the Aurelians as well, and so pretty much it was as a combination of Aurelian, Ancient Greek, and Celtic. And this is one reason probably why ancient Greek, well, one reason why Latin or Proto-Italic and Proto-Celtic are related, and why they sound similar to Spanish, porque suenas como español, and that's because, well, Spanish or Español is mainly based off of Latin, and Latin is also based off of ancient Greek, partly also based off of ancient Greek. And when I was listening to Mycenaean Greek, which is even more ancient than ancient Greek, or what would probably be more influenced by our brothers and sisters, the Akkadians, after the Trojan War, because again, people like to say, people might want to say that the Trojans and the Greeks were very different people, but they actually weren't as different as people think they are. They're actually pretty much brother and sister. And actually, I can pull this up from the ancestry, in particular J2b. I'll see if I can pull it up. where it specifies that the Mycenaean Greeks, or what we would know as the pretty much the Aurelians and the Akkadians, they had a shared lineage of J2B, and it's found in the ancient Greek world, which is Ionia, Magna Graecia, which is also northwest Anatolia. It originally was part of Greece. Actually, it wasn't originally part of before it was called Turkey. It was originally part of the ancient Greek world. And even though it's not as found as often, with the people from Crete, because actually the people from Crete were there before Mycenaean Greeks, and this would be related to the Mannonians. Um, J2B was found with from the Mycenaean culture, and it seems like they had been, they left the steppe due to the advance of the Srubna culture. When I think of Srubna, I think of Snobna for whatever reason. But you know, like quit being a snob. But anyways, as a result, both the Aurelians and the Mycenaeans, and when they say Albanians, really, it's not just Albanians. It's really because I've actually seen a lot of Albanians, and they'll ask, why do a lot of you Spaniards or Spanish people, why do you have a lot of Aurelian ancestry? And that's because the Aurelians were really, they were the ancient Greeks. They were the Mycenaean Greeks. They were the ones who had fought in the Trojan War. These were the original people. And some of them had settled in Albania, yes, but others had went to Spain. And I know there's a huge argument between the Albanians and Greeks, fighting each other about who were the original Greeks, and that probably has to do with some of the Aryan or Slavic ancestry. And I don't just want to blame the Slavs, but there's this kind of power struggle of who were the original people of these lands. But this is why it's important to mention not only the Aryans or the Slavs, but also what Uncle Herman calls me the Celtic healer, because we were some of the people who probably had left ancient Greece after the Trojan War, or some of us did, and we populated different parts of Italy and Spain or Iberia. Don't want to forget the Portuguese now. But anyways, and then some of us had also gone to sailed north into Ireland as well and other places. So this is where that ancient Greek connection comes from, and this is probably one reason why Spanish is actually, in some ways, there are some words that are closer in Spanish to ancient Greek than they are to than modern Greek is. Actually, the word archoides, in modern Greek, it's a different word, but in ancient Greek, pretty much it matches one for one with Spanish. And ancient Greek, if you want to say rainbow, you would say iris. In Spanish, you say arcoiris, and to me that means arc of the rainbow. So I know some of the Greeks, you may think, well, ancient Greek isn't really, worth the time to learn, but it actually is because these were the original ancestors that had lived in Greece long ago. Uh, Feel like I can hear Athena saying Los dos, and she's like smiling. Because it's true, it is really Los dos in the sense that, or both, in the sense that, the Akkadians and Trojans, we may have fought each other, and maybe the goddess Athena was at the time on the Akkadian side. I could feel her saying, "I'm sorry, Jem." It happens, it happens. Things happen for a reason, and we're meant to heal things. And then Hector of Troy and Apollo was on the Trojan side. But the reality is it was really to me more so of a civil war than anything else because I know some people will try to say these two people were completely different, but they are actually to me it's almost like Acadians and Aurelians fighting each other is almost like if you get Scots and Irish fighting each other. or the Picts and Gaels. Like, we are in some ways we are brothers and sisters, and we are, we are, or it's like someone saying Democrat or Republican or two-party system, or whatever you want to say. We are really part of the ultimately the same family or the same. We do have a common ancestor, and so I wanted to point that out very clearly because I know this is a huge debate, particularly in the Balkans right now. But no, this is the truth, and yes, it's verdad, and it's why it's important to share. And you can even see this 12,000 years ago. Some of the original people who would have eventually spread farming into Europe, which originally started in southern Europe, and then migrated north, where they would have mixed with the Yamnaya or the Belbeaker or the Celts, who came in around 5,000 years ago. And this would also be connected to actually around the beginnings of the ancient Egyptian civilization, actually later on. I actually watched this a YouTuber called Debbie Solaris, and she talks a lot about ancient Egypt, and I wanted to mention that because she talks a lot about ancient Egypt and the different kind of you know gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt like Horus and Osiris, but I was watching another YouTuber and she said that Osiris, the Egyptian name is it's I think it sounds something similar to Azar, I think. Let me pull that up to make sure because I think that's what it is. Let me pull it up because she had mentioned that in her video. Her name is her YouTube channel's name is Metatron Speaks. Egyptian name for uh, Asar, yes, Asar. It sounds in some ways it can even sound similar to Azer or Aesir, like the Norse gods from Asia. Or well, it would have been Aesir would have meant Asia. But no, in this case, Azar is more so would have been the Egyptian name. Okay, so we cleared that up. No, it's like no, I wanted to mention that because I know Debbie and her assistant Anne, they talk a lot about Egypt, and so this is why I think it's important to mention uh, kind of this understanding. Yes, and you can see haplogroup J1A and E were also prevalent in ancient Egypt, and also R1B1, which would have been more so connected to Yamnaya, Belbeaker, Celtic, was actually found with King Tut, and this would have been around a little over 3,000 years ago. Yes, so that would have been a little bit later on, but originally it seems like J1A would have actually have been connected to one of the oldest lineages in Europe or non-Europe in Egypt. So anyways, that's important to mention. And as I've said before, um, the uh, the people with the pale or white skin tone, 'cause I know there's always this fight about who were the Egyptians? Were they more so related to modern Europeans or black Africans? And there's this fight between these two. And so I remind them, to me it's more so steppe ancestry and black Africans, they're fighting each other. And then so I remind that you're missing part of the puzzle. Think of like the Millennium Puzzle. that in between the steppe and Africa is the Caucasus region. And the Caucasus region would have been where the skin tone, where the lighter skin tone, even lighter than yellow, had come from. And so this is probably why when some people look at the Berber and the Amazigh and they ask, why do these Amazigh, why do some of them have pale skin tone? They try to attribute it to like Vandals and other people who had come into North Africa, particularly during the Dark Ages. The reason why is because uh, they had come from that lineage of really the Anatolian farmers. That they had spread that lineage into North Africa even before steppe people had arrived, essentially. And so this is why, for those who get confused of, who's the real ancestor of Egypt. Well, it was actually, really a combination of different groups, and actually even the ancient Egyptians themselves knew this. And I'll see if I can pull up the map with the four different colored people to kind of give you an idea. And actually, it matches with the medicine wheel, the natives actually, four colored people of Egypt. And you can see there's the black Nubians, which were pretty much they had originated uh, in the south of Egypt, or there was a connection there. Then you have the Syrians. To me, they were really originated from Syria or from which would have been pretty close to the Levant. Then you have the red people, or the red man, which would have been related to the Egyptians proper. And then you have the white people, which are not Syrians, because the Syrians would have been more so yellowish in a way. The Libyans were probably connected to the original Anatolian farmers who had come from uh, really pretty much from the Caucasus, and they had come down, and yes, and this is probably where some of their lineage had come from. And so yes, I wanted to mention that because I know it's always a power struggle, especially, who were the original ancestors of Egypt, ancient Egypt? Well, we all kind of were in the sense that it was a place where a lot of different people met together. You had people from the steppe, you had people from the Caucasus, you had the black Africans already there, and then you had the ancient Egyptians there too, or the red man, I would say. And so no, we were all there. We were all there. And so and some people might say, well, where does a red man come from? And I would say, well, they probably came from a similar area where the yellow people had come from, or similar area to the Syrians. Like if you look at it, I'll see if I can pull up a picture of Mongolia, because I think this does it best, where Mongolia has different clans of people, and not just Genghis Khan there, but there's different groups of people that were there in Central Asia. One being the Altoy people, which you can see has a little bit more of the Aryan ancestry, and then the Sagae people have more so Finnish ancestry, which would have actually been originally related to what we know today as Han Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And notice how the Altoy people, and they say the Altoy people were actually related to what eventually became, the Aztecs, or part of the Aztecs, the Incas, and the Iroquois. And the Iroquois would be pretty much be connected to the Cherokee and other native tribes in the U.S. But in the Aztecs and Incas, they went further south in the Americas. But notice this man, this Altoy man, he has, he does look Asian to an extent, or has some connection to East Asia in some ways, but he definitely has like a reddish skin tone. And you can also see this too with the with some of the Cherokee, and not only the Cherokee, but even some of the Aztecs, and I'll see if I can pull up the Incas as well. Some of them, there are some that have a bit more of a reddish skin tone. Yes, so you can see that there. And then let me pull up the Inca. Yes. And so yes, and so this is probably one reason why a lot of people have made comparisons between ancient Egypt and or the Egyptians and the people in Peru in particular. And the reason probably why they're connected is because, well, they would have been connected to what do I want to say it? Some people try to say that they are descendants of a common ancestor from Atlantis, and and probably what happened, from what I can gather, uh, is remember I mentioned earlier that some of the original people who populated the Americas were Polynesian Island Hoppers, or people who had uh, sailed through the Pacific even before the Mammoth Hunters, or even before what would be more seen as Native American Indian today, particularly in the U.S. and in parts of Canada. The Polynesians, or the Jomon, they had come beforehand. And then there were another group of people who also came to the Americas as well. And they had come from the West. They had come from, uh, pretty much yeah, the Atlantic Ocean. And this is what the Mi'kmaq people talk about. So this was a sample of a native found 8,000 years ago, and he actually looks very similar to the Ainu people of Hokkaido, Japan. And actually, when I was looking at some of the Jomon ancestry, because remember the Jomon, the indigenous people of Japan, uh, in, and this is probably after the Ice Age, or it could have been before, but I'm thinking it was after the Ice Age. Was that there were people from the Caucasus who they found their way into Japan, and they had contributed to the ancestry of the Ainu. Um, and but there were also people who had uh, sailed from the Middle East or from the Caucasus, and the Mi'kmaq people, the natives from Northeast Canada. I've read, if I can remember correctly, that their story was that they had migrated to Greece, and then they migrated north to Scandinavia. They sailed to Greenland, and then they eventually got into Canada. And after they got into Canada, then they probably traveled west, and this is where Kennewick Man eventually came originated in Western Washington over 8,000 years ago. But as Hypatia Lee says, the native ancestry is not just only paternal, but they also tend to also be very matrilineal, which means that they tend to also go from the mother's side. And so for them, or rather, with haplogroup X in particular, that haplogroup is not found in Asia, in East Asia or Siberia. It might be found in the Altoy region, uh, but actually there's that connection with the Altoy people that I had mentioned. The red man is because the Altoy are very red in their skin tone. The Altoy in Mongolia, Western Mongolia, um, or southwestern, yeah. however you want to say it, that that they haplogroup X had actually come from West Asia, which again is pretty much the Middle East. And so yes, they for them probably instead of uh, migrating through the Pacific Ocean like some of the Jomon did, they probably had migrated the opposite direction west into through the Atlantic and into the Americas. And so this is why some natives still carry that haplogroup X ancestry, and you can see it more predominant in uh, especially in North America or in the U.S. and Canada. But it can even be found, even though it's not as readily seen in the DNA anymore. Um, People say that some of the natives in South America also descended from Kennewick man, and so there's that connection as well that the descendants of Kennewick man 8,000 years ago, they didn't all just stay north in the U.S. and Canada. They also migrated all the way down south into South America, and you can see it through the DNA as well. Even though haplogroup X would eventually, in South America, would become more so haplogroup B, which would be connected to Polynesia, and then C and D, which is also East Asia, Siberia, and then even a bit of haplogroup A later on, which was more so from people who were coming north from Alaska and other groups. Haplogroup X, that legacy still lives on, not only in the U.S. and Canada, but also in South America. So so yes, there's that lineage as well, and you can see it in particular in the modern day to the Sioux people who live in the Lakota or the Lakota Dakota people, the New Cha Nulth people, and these are natives who live in the Pacific Northwest, and the Navajo, which live in kind of in the Southwest in the Yakima, which they live in Washington State. So this one lady in particular, she actually reminds me a bit of a bit of more so like of a Mayan woman, and because again they had a shared ancestry, even though in that picture she doesn't seem too happy. Here you can see the Mayan women are laughing and having a good time, which is definitely nice to see. Okay, so we covered that, and again, I wanted to mention that because I know there's a lot of, you know, you know, arguments about, did the natives, did they come from different areas or, where they came from? But yeah, no, I wanted to cover that to kind of give a more complete story. Okay, so we've covered Siberia, we've covered the Caucasus, we've covered Anatolian farmers, and we've covered ancient Egypt and the Americas. So now we're going to go into to another place. This is actually going to be in Europe, but it's not going to start in Northern Europe. Because remember, during the Ice Age, Northern Europe was frozen, so people couldn't settle that area. Or maybe they could, but you'd probably be sliding on ice, and you know, and more so than what you would even see in some of the harshest cold climates. Um, like it really wasn't inhabitable to an extent. Uh, like yeah. And so that's why they had to migrate down south. And so where did they migrate to? Well, I think you'll be quite surprised because this is the this is what a lot of people, particularly from Britain, or not just from Ireland, also Britain, and not just Irish, Scots, and Welsh, but in particular a lot of the English. They don't like to hear this, but this Los Ingleses, but this is the truth. That's the original people who would have been the indigenous people of Britain and Ireland. They originally had settled. Some of them had settled in a cave in Granada, which is not only in northern Spain, but actually southern Spain, and not just southern Spain. Pretty much, Granada is not too far away from North Africa, so that's probably there's that connection between the Amazigh and the Berbers and people from Spain. And so, why is this so important? Why is this so important to discuss? Because as you can notice here, a lot of what we know today is more so northern European tribes. They originally had settled in their indigenous ancestors of the Ice Age. They had settled in Spain, in Granada. I could hear the fire bells go off, and they're like, "You can't do that. You can't tell me I'm from Southern Europe." Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's where some of your ancestors are from. You might not like to hear that, but that's the truth. Because, well, if they had tried to settle Northern Europe back then, it would have been covered in ice. They just wouldn't have been able to settle it. That's just the truth. And you may not like to hear that, but that's how it is. Yeah, it's that's just how it works, right? So yeah, so they would have been connected to different tribes like the Olsi, Nemetis, and Nemetis is actually I learned it's connected to like the Celtic sacred groves. And so the groves of the Celts would have been that's what the name of the Metis would have been connected to. Also the Ostrogoths, these would have been some of the people who would eventually inhabit Gotland, and Gotland would be in southern Sweden, in Scandinavia. Then you have the Quadi and Macromani, which are all other. I think the Macromani is a Germanic tribe, excuse me, as well as the Quadi. And by the way, these tribes also existed before Aryans got into Europe, and even before Yamnaya, Belbeek, or what we would associate with Celts today, even before they got into Europe. These were the original indigenous Europeans 22,000 years ago. That these were some of the original people. And these original people would have been most associated today genetically with the French. I feel like some of them don't want to hear that. That's the truth, though. That's the truth. The Welsh, the South Dutch, the Flemish, the Southwest English, the West Germans, Galicians from Spain, Northwest Spain, Southeast English, and yeah, that's the truth. Uh, I feel like in the comments people are gonna say, you can't do this to me." Well, your ancestors, or our ancestors, well, some of them took refuge in the Caucasus during the Ice Age, and then some of them who I guess weren't there, they they took refuge in Europe, and that's just how it worked. So, and you can see here also the Celts, those who would become the Celts of what we know today in Britain, Ireland, and other parts of Europe. The Celts, the Celtic Voltadini, which live in close to Edinburgh in Scotland and also northern England. The Picts, which would have been another group in Scotland. The Gaels would have been part of the Ulster saga, or some of the ancient sagas in Irish folklore. They also lived, some of the original ancestors also lived in Spain, in Granada. Connection to also North Africa. And this is probably one reason why some of the people of Ireland and Scotland, why some of them have Berber or Amazigh ancestry, because some of them probably had mixed with those people from, or mixed with Amazigh Berber from North Africa, or pretty much what I mean the Berber Amazigh. I'm talking about even before the what we recognize today as Libyans, even before they had come forth, with migration from people from the Caucasus and Anatolian farmers. That before then, really the original Europeans more so had a darker skin tone. Um, and I'll see if I can pull up an image of Cheddar Man. Okay, and actually Cheddar Man from England is going to be important. And why is it going to be important? Because, okay, so I want to mention this to you that so very pale skin had come from the Caucasus. Blonde hair actually came from uh, pretty much the first known person with blonde hair was actually very close to Siberia, and this would have been 17,000 years ago, and this would have been kind of connected to the people who would have been so the Native American Indians, the Celts, and the Slavs or Aryans or whatever you want to say it. The first person to have blonde hair, not blue eyes, because back they didn't have blue eyes back then. Well, at least not in that part of the world. But the first person with blonde hair originally had come from really, let me see here, ancient North Eurasian, Southern Siberian. Yeah, so they had come from yeah, South Central Siberia. Um, yes. So yeah, so that would have come from Siberia. But however, blue eyes did not come from Siberia. Some people may not want to hear that, just like some people don't want to hear their skin came uh, from the Caucasus, which would have really the Middle East. Uh, but yeah, the oldest person with blue eyes was actually in Leon, Spain, 7,000 years ago, or somewhere around uh, you know around that time. This was the first person, or one of the first people that had developed blue eyes. And his skin tone may have been a bit of a darker shade, but he had blue eyes. And so when you think about where did blue eyes come from? Well, it came from Southern Europe, and that's the truth. And this is probably one reason too. And here's an image of Cheddar Man. This would have been one of the original people of Britain, and they also they would have been related to the people from Spain or the original indigenous people there because, well, the hunter-gatherers, not the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, but the original, uh, the hunter-gatherers of not the Caucasus, but the hunter-gatherers of Europe. Yes, the indigenous, yeah, that's the best way I can say it. Yeah, so, that's the shared origin. Uh, and that would come from haplogroup I2a. And that's a very ancient lineage in Europe, going all the way back to the Gravantine culture, which would have been during the Ice Age, at least over 30,000 years ago. And that lineage, I and J, they originally were part of the same group originally, but they had split off around 40,000 years ago from the Middle East. So again, even the haplogroup I, even though it spent much of its time in Europe, it itself originally also came from the Middle East, just like Haplogroup J. But yes, no, the first person with blue eyes, they had come, they were found in Spain and also in Britain through the form of Cheddarman. Actually, my friend Julie is actually connected to Cheddarman. And I might too through like a shared ancestry of like European hunter gatherer. But yes, that's how it was. So they had a darker skin tone, dark hair, but blue eyes. So I can feel people in the comments they're not gonna like it, but that's fine. They can shove their whatever ideas. I'll say no more and I'll continue here. So so here's another connection with Granada, Spain, España. You can see Belgium, Gael, Celtic, Parisii. So people, Celts who eventually inhabited Paris, Nemetes, Celts. They all, were there during the Ice Age in you know, España. So that's just it. Yeah. Uh, okay. So so where does Greece come into all this? Because I know I mentioned the Caucasus region, Anatolian farmers, Native Americans, Siberians, yada yada yada. Spain. Yeah. So where does Greece come into all this? Well, told you about the Greeks that the Mycenaeans or the Aurelians. There were those who went into Egypt and those who went to other parts of Europe, but there were those who also settled and formed a civilization in Greece around 3,500 years ago. And back then, these original Mycenaeans weren't just Akkadians, because I know there's this back and forth, with Albanians and Greeks, who were the original Greeks, of Greece. Well, they definitely weren't Aryans, that's for sure. They definitely weren't Slavs. People are not going to like to hear that, but that's the truth. The original people were Aurelians, Akkadians, Macedonians, Pannonians, Samnites, Corinthian Greeks, and even some Phoenicians who actually came into Greece. And it was said that the Greeks actually they had borrowed some of their alphabets actually from the Phoenicians because, well, we mixed together. And the Phoenicians were quote unquote one of the tribes of Israel. Back then they wouldn't have been called Jews. They would have just said one of the tribes of Israel. And they were polytheistic and it kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy 14 where they have like the Ascians or the not even before Ascians the people of Elpis and the people of Elpis there were 14 different convocations or 14 different kind of seats if you will, and to me the Phoenicians the 13th seat would have represented more so Elidibus or Themis. So because he was the one who kind of wanted to have a balance between light and dark, and so this might have been a connection to the Phoenicians, which played a large role in the formation of, or at least part of a role in the connection to Greece. So where does the 14th seat come from then? Where does the 14th kind of group come from? Well, it would have come from the Aurelians, or it would have come from not just her, but uh, let me see if I can pull this up. It would have come from, well, and I know this is mentioning a game now that I enjoy, Final Fantasy XIV, but I feel like it really has a connection. That and why do I mention the Aurelians in particular? Because unlike the other tribes, even the Phoenicians, the Aurelians, they understood where they came from, or well, those who would have still remembered, as Emmett Selk or Hades would say, you know, or even beyond the Knot or one of the Heidelin, one of the original people of the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Um, the Aurelians, they were kind of like the Asm, if you will, or when I mean to say the Asm of this world. What I'm saying is, unlike the other 13 seats or the other 13 tribes, even with Elidibus, who travel around, the 14th seat, Asm, he really was a free spirit. This is probably why the Aurelians, unlike the other, because I know with in particular with what would eventually become to be known today as Jews, the Aurelians were a little bit different, where they mixed almost with everyone. They didn't just stay in the Caucasus, or they didn't just restrict themselves to the Levant, or what would be known eventually known as Israel or Ashkelon or any of that. They migrated everywhere. And when I mean everywhere, I mean they migrated into Europe. Uh, they migrated into probably parts of North Africa. They migrated into Spain. They had migrated to Ireland. Probably through the Miletians, the sons of Mil. Uh, and then also to the Americas. When the New World was found. And yes, because the Aurelians understood, and the Aurelians, by the way, were the ones who would have been connected to the Mycenaean Greeks, or they were the Mycenaeans. They were, aside from the Acanians and other groups. Um, they understood the meaning of Rainbow, which in Scandinavian means rainbow. And it would come from probably a connection to not only Norway and Sweden or Gotland, but also Dinamarca, Denmark. So, and also Arcoides, which, as I say, is still retained in the Spanish language, the word Edis, uh, which in ancient Greek means rainbow, which probably would be connected to also the Mycenaeans, the Aurelians, which, a lot of Spanish people are descended from them. Uh, and so this is why when, some people, I watched a video one time, and I think it was something about why are some Latinos, or why some people of Spanish descent, why do they have pale skin? Because again, they don't realize that the original people of Spain, of Hispania, of the ancient Greek world, of the Mycenaeans, they spoke a language connected to Latin and Celtic and ancient Greek. Or when I mean Celtic, I mean Proto-Celtic, which is not, it's not Germanic, or it wouldn't be derived from Anglo-Saxon, or wouldn't have been derived from even just necessarily Old Norse, Old English, Gothic. That's it was connected really to uh, the original Proto-Celts, Proto-Italic, you know, I don't want to say Proto-Mycenaean, proto whatever. They all spoke a language that sounded very similar to Spanish, which was based on Latin, and it had a shared origin. I think they did a DNA test, and they said that the Romans that we know of, they weren't that different genetically from the Celts, actually. I know some people, and I know some people may not like to hear that, but that's the truth. Even in Britain, the genetic distance between a British Celt and a Roman, even as early as a little over 2,000 years ago, it would have been a similar genetic distance between a Dutchman and an Anglo-Saxon Englishman. Remember, the Anglo-Saxons they had come from northern Germany, Netherlands, and Scandinavia. But yes, no, and by the way, not even all the Scandinavians, not all of them either, were just only of one origin. Probably the people of Denmark, some of them, Dinamarca, some of them probably had come from Greece and they had traveled north. And so when people talk about the Tuatha De Danann, or the tribe of, or the Danu, they most likely came from, were connected to Mycenaean Greeks, Aurelians, who maybe after the Trojan War or even before or whenever, they migrated north and they became part of Dinamarca, part of Denmark. And then they had sailed into Ireland and they became known as the Tuatha De Danann. And then after that, then there were the Trojans, the Milesians, the sons of Mele. After the war, they went into Spain. Then they went north and they met the Tuatha De Danann. But the Tuatha De Danann and the Milesians really aren't as different as people think, because their shared origin goes back to, at least part of the shared origin goes back to Greece. Goes back to the Caucasus, or uh, you know that kind of part of the world. And so it's all really more so connected than people think. So yeah, I thought I'd point that out there. Yes, and the indigenous people of Scandinavia, even before corded wire, people had come there over 5,000 years ago, which would have been, the start of the Slavic, or not even Slavic, really genetic connection uh, to Aryans and all that. Um, and the reality is that the R1b and R1a, they all had a shared origin from Siberia anyways, so it's all kind of connected. And I think the natives, they mentioned that really, this is why they mentioned about the balance of nature and why it's so important to understand the cycles of nature, because if you don't understand it well enough, things can get out of whack, like what happened in some of and especially in the Second World War. And so in order to kind of set things back in motion, this is why it's so important to understand the origin of things and where did we come from and who are our ancestors. And I think even Bjorn mentions that, Bjorn from Norway. And so yes, so um, I think I was talking to my friend Julie today, and she had mentioned about Aaron, and Aaron is actually sounds similar to Aryan. Aryan sounds similar. He was actually the brother of Moses, which is mentioned for those who don't know, from a book called uh, the Old Testament, but it's shared by different groups. Um, and so his haplogroup was haplogroup J1A2. J1A2 would have been one of the well, it would have been connected to the original. lineage from the Middle East, from the Caucasus region. And so when it was talking about the use of the right hand, I was telling my friend Julie, the importance of the left hand because if you only had a right hand, it'd be like having one wing, and you can't really, and it'd be tough to fully fly without both wings, without both the left and the right wing. And so, and that's why I told her, if people say, you should only speak English or you should only speak this one language, people don't understand that even English itself is partly derived from Latin, and not only from Latin, but also which is ancient Greek, but it's also derived from Old Norse. And this is what Bjorn would like to say. That's I can see him kind of laughing because these were the original people in Scandinavia even before Aryans or Slavs or whatever you want to say it. The Gulfs of Gotland, of Sweden. Their original ancestors probably were connected to the indigenous people of Bulgaria, the Thracians, or the Thraci, which means dragon people, or the Draig in Welsh. Now, unlike what would be depicted of dragons later on in the Dark Ages as these kind of forces that needed to be destroyed indiscriminately and whatever. The Draichi, or the original Thracians, they saw the dragons in a positive force, or in the positive light, or they tended to see it more in a positive light. Very similar to how people in East Asia view dragons, like in China, Japan, that area, as well as other areas too. But yes, it was more so seen the dragons were more so seen in a positive light, or in a positive sense. And so, and again, this has the connection with the Norse, the Gulfs from Gotland, even the Franks, even all the people haplogroup I1 and I2, they all, really the indigenous people of Europe during the Ice Age, they all kind of had to have this shared lineage. And and I1, by the way, it didn't. So I2 was present for most of Europe, and I1 didn't come about until I think it was only as recent as 5,000 years ago. So what we know today as the Norse ethnic group, the Danes and the Goths, they originally really came from the same people that lived in Spain, or that they were in the Ice Age 22,000 years ago. They had come from I2, and these people were some of the oldest people in Europe. But so I1 came about not until much later, and you can see here haplogroup I2 lived alongside J2A farmers, Anatolian farmers, which would have also been connected to Aurelians and the people with the fairer skin tone. And they started off in not in northern Europe, but in southeastern and southwestern Europe, in the Balkans, Italy, Sardinia, uh, and probably even Spain. So I think a lot of people tend to look at things more so from a top to bottom rather than from the ground up. I think that's one of the problems that people tend to look top to bottom, but you also need to look. But the thing is, if you have no bottom, you're going to collapse. That's just what's going to happen. If the bottom doesn't hold you anymore, you're going to collapse, whether you like it or not. That's why you have to build a strong bottom. No pun intended. You got to build a strong bottom if you want to have a strong top, and that's just how it works. Yeah, and I think Bjorn would laugh to hear this. I think he can say, "Oh, okay, now I see who were the people who set these stones, you know, in Norway. That's they were some of the original people here." And I would say, "Yes, you're right, my brother, because well, he is my brother. I mean, maybe not by, like very close by blood, but I still feel like he's my brother, hermano." And I'll see if I can post an additional video of Bjorn talking about roots and ancestry and why it's so important to understand where you came from. He actually also mentioned Otzi, the Iceman, as well, which would have been connected to the Anatolian or the Caucasian, you know, farmers, you know, from Georgia, and also connected to the Aurelians and all that good stuff. And also, you know, some of the original people who settled in Sardinia and I think even Sicily as well, actually, and other islands in Italy. I think Debbie would, in particular, Debbie Solaris, should get a kick out of that and kind of laugh in a good way. Um, yes, and so yeah, that's just how it works. Yeah, yeah, that's just how it works. I'm just reading the results here. No, it's just silly. I can see Bjorn saying these people. I don't blame him, but it says here the most likely hypothesis at present is that I1 and I2 lineages were dispersed around Europe during the Mesolithic, and that some branches proposed more than others thanks to an early adoption of agriculture upon contact with Near Eastern farmers from Anatolia, were slowly making their way across the Balkans and the Mediterranean shores. And you can see that because I actually had some Bulgarian, even earlier than 800. I had some going back like 3,000 before Common Era, so like 5,000 years ago. You know, there were already these people that were here, and they were connected to the Aurelians, Pannonians, the Gauls, the Goidels, the Goidelic, the Gauls, yes. You know, that's what the professor was saying. You know, when Red Hugh O'Donnell went into Spain and he told the Spanish king, "Hey, we're connected." He's right because the Gauls and the Aurelians they really had a shared ancestry, and also the Visigoths and from or the Goths from what we know today is Gotland or Sweden, and also connection to Norway and other parts of Scandinavia. We were all connected, and yeah. It's like, you know, that's just how it works, you know. I can already, you know, hear the typing of a angry I don't want it to happen, but I feel like you know, because in the last video I did, I got some people from England of all places saying, you know, you don't know what you're talking about the Celts, you know, you just, you know, whatever. But no, this is the truth, and that's how it is. Uh, and so yes, so you have the Gauls, Ostrogoths, yeah, again the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, those of Gotland, you know, but they were really also connected to the Thracians or the Thraci. You can even see it as far back as 5,000 years ago. They were there. The Thraci, the Thracians, the Cenomani, which was a Celtic tribe, Macedonian, Etruscan, they were all there. And so, uh, yeah. And that could have even influenced some of the dragon longships as well of the Norsemen, potentially. And the Goths, Goths and all that. And you can even see here in Bulgaria around 5,000 years ago, we have the Phoenicians who were also connected to probably some of the Anatolian farmers. You know, they were coming in and saying, "Hey, like, yeah, let's start, you know, growing these you know, cultivating the land, as it were. So, so there it is. Um, okay, so I can see Bjorn. He's just like he's just laughing. He's like these. No, I don't want to say it in a negative way. I could just see him laugh. Like, you know, it's good though. It's a good laughter. It's Bjorn would probably say these fucking bastards. No, he did a video one time where the people were telling him, you know, you're going to a bad place because you believe in the Norse mythology and Odin and Norse paganism and what he said was you guys don't even know that some of the English language was influenced from Norse. Like Tuesday was Tears Day, Wednesday was Odin's Day, Thursday was Thor's Day, and Friday was Freya's Day. He's like, I had it up to here with them, but yeah, no, it was great. Um, so yeah, there's the bit of the healing guardian dragon connection, and I think this in particular connects a lot with my dad because my dad's name in Spanish it's Sigifredo, but really it comes from the Norse word. Well, there's Siegfried as well, but it really comes from Sigurd or Siggy. It's of Norse origin or Norse Gotland, however you want to say it. The original people. Herman Siegfried the Cherusci. Herman compares him to Cherokee, but yeah, no. So I think that this really helps to shift that narrative from just the being a dragon slayer, just killing a dragon indiscriminately to okay, now we understand the original meaning of the dragons or the Dreichi or the Dreig, which Welsh would be Dreig, and Norwegian might be Dragon. I'd have to say I would be in Old Norse and Goth, but or Worm or however you want to say it. I prefer Dreichi, Dreig or Dreichi. I prefer that. But anyways, they were originally seen as dragon guardians or healing guardian dragons, just like the dragons probably not only of Atlantis but also East Asia. So that original narrative of the dragons being seen in a positive light, yes, it all kind of comes full circle, and so I think that's important to mention. So yes, yes, that's yeah, and it says here some of the original people who lived in Sweden, they turned out to belong to I2A1 and not I1. So, the people who were living in Bulgaria, 5,000 years ago were some of the original people in Sweden or Gotland. That's where they came from. They were connected to these Bulgarian samples from a long time ago. I'll see if I can find one that's I2A1 in particular. Whether it's I2A1 or I2, I mean, it's so close. But I'll see if I can find one that's in particular I1 because let's see if I can find it here. Let's see. You got Hungary, but hold on, I'm gonna see if I can find one that's really. You got Serbia, but let me see Bulgaria in particular. So Bulgaria, 2,000 years ago. Okay. Okay. Oh, well, there's one. Almost 5,000. So this would be. Yeah. So sites. So even before I-1, or even before what we know today as Franks and Danish, or the Danes who went Viking, Goths, or before I-1 in particular, it's all connected anyways. To me, it's all just kind of like, to me, it's just the tree grew another branch. Yggdrasil grew another branch, but or just a different path. Um, they you know the yeah they lived in Bulgaria, and they were related to uh Etruscans, Phoenicians, Dacians, people of Sicily, and Macedonians. So actually, the Etruscan looks a little bit like a dragon in some ways. So I could see that in some ways, but healing guardian dragon. But yes, it's all kind of connected, and you can see it even in medieval Ireland, Iron Age Holstat, Bronze Age Orkney Scotland, Neolithic Scotland, uh, Hungarian, Viking Age Sweden, Gotland. There it is. So it's all connected, all of it. Okay, so um, yes. I just want to say yes. Okay. Okay, and so before I end the video, I also want to talk about the Sinomani people. The Sinomani people, as I showed you before, they were kind of an interesting group. The Gem. Actually,